Hello, movie fans, and welcome to Lost in the Reel. Today, I am so excited to be sharing with all of you part 2 of a special project I got to collaborate on with one of my dearest friends on YouTube and someone who I greatly admire. If you don't know who he is yet, his name is Movieman. And please make sure to check out his channel where you can watch part 1 of this collab. A link will be down below in the description, or you can click right up here. This project is very close to my heart, as Dee and I discuss the movies that have impacted us deeply, molded who we are as critics, and cultivated our lifelong obsession with cinema. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy part 2 of the top 10 movies that changed us.
All right, so my next film is Chicago, directed by Rob Marshall in 2002. I have never been opposed to musicals. I think most of us, we start out with Barney, Sesame Street. We start out with that kind of programming. And then we watch Disney films and animated films. There's usually, joyful, funny, enjoyable songs. We get used to that. And outside of Mary Poppins, I wasn't used to live action musicals. The only other example was probably The Sound of Music, which I still associated because they were both Julie Andrews. Mm-hmm. So I still kind of grouped those together. But as far as like a teenager and that medium, it's like, I don't know how to get into people just bursting out in song and doing, choreography. And I didn't see it. So I remember watching Chicago. I even remember the trailers, and it looked good, but I was like, oh boy, this is one of those. And so I remember watching it the first time. There was so much that I appreciated about it visually, but there was still a disconnect there. It's like, I get it, but I don't click with it all the way. Mm-hmm. So this is another one of those examples where I came back to it later, and it was different. It's like, I still am not 100% here, but this feels different from the first time I watched it, and then watched it again and watched it again. Then all of a sudden, boom, it suddenly made sense. It was like, wait. This isn't just people, dancing and singing out of nowhere. This is about this main character having dreams and aspirations of vaudeville and being a star. And every time we shift to some of these numbers, it's this imagined fantasy of real life. And we are cutting back and forth between the ugliness and grittiness of reality with, the stage and vaudeville. This is this, idealized version of it. And when that hit me, it was like, whoa, this is this is genius, It really changed the way I perceive musicals, and even live action musicals and Broadway adaptations, musical adaptations, and so on and so forth. And when I tell you, I can literally listen to I think initially, All That Jazz and When You're Good to Mama. I think those are probably the only songs I listened to. And now it's like, I can throw a dart and any song that pops up. Although I think my favorite is They Both Reach for the Gun. I love that song. I love that whole set piece with the puppetry and just the visual wonder of that film. And it kind of messed me up because I didn't see the original musical, but I didn't realize that the style of the original musical and Bob Fosse and all that, it's very, very different. So, and I appreciate both, but this was something totally new for me.
That was my number 11 choice, was Chicago. And I'm so happy that you brought this up, and I completely agree with you, everything that you just said. I also, when I was younger, musicals, I was like, no, I don't want it. I'm not here for it. And my mom was like, please, go see Chicago with me. She was dying to see it. And I was like, fine. Was not excited about it at all. And then Chicago just opened up my eyes to musicals and what they can be. I mean, it's still one of my favorite musicals of all time, but it was the first one that it hit me like so hard. Like musicals are incredible and they can transcend, you know, The Sound of Music and all of those kind of movies. And I will also agree with you on like the stage play, because I went to go see the stage play and I was like, this is not it. Like, I was very disappointed.
Exactly. And I think it speaks to how much they did to distinguish it that people were like, oh, okay, this is not the same.
Yeah, I mean, what Rob Marshall, that's two movies now that you picked up Rob Marshall. But like he really took the bare bones of that, you know, that show and just turned it into something magnificent.
Absolutely.
Great choice, D. My next film is Princess Mononoke.
Ooh, yes.
Hayao Miyazaki is one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. And I was going to put My Neighbor Totoro on this list because that was probably one of my, like, it was definitely my first foray into anime films. I had to go with Princess Mononoke because it was the first time I saw an animation that it was like, whoa, like this medium is not just for children, it's for adults as well. And we can tell these stories, you know, about these really hard hitting stories like in Princess Mononoke about war and the environment, and that it can transcend kind of the medium of just being just for kids. And it's just one of the most beautiful films to look at ever made. Yeah, I mean, I had such a hard time. I wanted to choose every single Hayao Miyazaki movie, but I kind of settled on this because it kind of opened up my eyes to then Spirited Away too, which is one of my favorite animated films.
Yes, you cannot go wrong with Hayao Miyazaki. Mm-hmm. I want to say I couldn't have been maybe 7 or 8. One of my cousins just so happened to have Kiki's Delivery Service, and I remember watching that. And you know, you watch Disney, you watch other animated films, but it was so different. There was something about the tone and the atmosphere and the characters. I'm like, this is new. It's like it's animated. It's childlike in theory, but it's totally different. And Princess Mononoke is probably the one. If I had to just kind of like snatch one out of the bunch, Princess Mononoke was mind blowing for me. I just remember sitting there staring at the screen. I was like, I don't have any words for this.
Yeah, definitely. It's so funny that you bring that up about like seeing something different with Kiki's Delivery Service. When I was younger, I was always obsessed with animation, but there was a point when I was like, no more Disney movies. And I literally would have my dad, he'd go out to Walmart to the bargain bin and find like the most obscure animated movies possible and bring them home. And I was just fascinated by different types of animation. And that's where Totoro came from, was the bottom of a bargain bin, as sad as that is.
Well, definitely a good example of a hidden gem. Had to kind of, it was definitely buried, hidden, but
I had to search for it, but found it. Changed my life.
Yes. My next film is one that I ended up seeing much later in life. And I'm not sad about it because I think I'm glad at this age I can appreciate it in all of its glory. And that film is All About Eve, written and directed by Joseph L. Mankiewicz in 1950. This is one of those days where I was literally at my job at the desk by an internet cafe. I used to work in the library, and it was like a Saturday and no one was around. I didn't have any like real responsibilities other than watching the desk. And I was like, hey, what do I watch? I had Netflix up and I saw something that said All About Eve. And I'm like, oh, well, I've been a fan of Bette Davis, you know, since I was young. Whatever happened to Baby Jane, that was my early experience, exposure to both her and Joan Crawford. So, okay, and I love a classic old Hollywood black and white film, so let's go for it. I was not ready for that film. I was not ready for the experience. Like, I was engrossed. I was just kind of sitting watching the film and just kind of reacting and into it and feeling it. And not just the casting is kind of casting speaks for itself, especially with Betty Davis and Margot Channing, which is, you know, one of her best performances, which is really not saying much because she's had so many throughout her run. I think that this film really impacted me because it's the first time that I've ever looked at a film, looked at the dialogue, and really said, "Man, like who wrote this?" And the things the characters are saying and how they're interacting with each other. Like I absolutely loved it, and I was so appreciative of the experience while I was watching and after. And it's one of those films I've shared with so many different people, and they enjoyed as well. And I think it really is a masterclass as far as what that style of filmmaking and those type of films represented during that time. I love it.
Yeah, that's definitely one I'm gonna have to watch again. This is one of the films I watched in film school, and I think it's one of those things like when you're forced to watch something, it's not by your own volition, you know, like I don't know. It was probably a mental block on my part, and I was just kind of tuning out. So that is definitely, I'm gonna have to give that another shot. I do love me some Betty Davis.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
My next film is actually a movie that I don't particularly like very much.
Oh.
I kept going back and forth on whether to put it on here, but I think it's important for me to address this film and why it changed me. It's American Psycho.
Mm.
During that summer of movies where I was kind of discovering all of these different films and whatnot, I came upon American Psycho, and everyone's like, you have to see this movie. It's going to change your whole worldview and everything. And so I watched it, and I was so excited for it. And then I literally did not like it. And I kept thinking, like, what's wrong with me? And why don't I like this movie? So I watched it again. I still didn't like it. And American Psycho kind of became one of these films where it's like, I realized that it's okay if people disagree with my opinion about film, and that's what film is all about. And that's, we all get something different from having a film experience. And for me, American Psycho didn't do it, and it still doesn't do it to this day, but I can appreciate why others do love it so much. But it kind of was why it's on this list is it took me kind of to get past this mental block of being like, it's okay that I disagree with people on this film. And that's what this is all about, this critiquing and reviewing film and talking about it. So that's why it's on the list.
Yes. American Psycho is another one where I guess I had a perception of the type of film that would be.
Mm-hmm.
And I partly understand that, but there's this other abstract piece to it. Whereas I thought it would be a much more straightforward film. And I was just like, I don't know about this. Like you said, I appreciate, or if I don't appreciate at least, I do understand what it's wanting to be and trying to be. But same, I can understand why it doesn't click with me all the way. So my next film is Jurassic Park, directed by Steven Spielberg in 1993. So the reason I had to include this, and I have all kinds of films, and I try to go with ones that are a little more, maybe under the radar, or ones that maybe smaller films, or just have like quiet impacts. But the reason why I had to choose Jurassic Park, not only was it another VHS in my drawer and a part of that early film experience, but I've been asking people this question a lot, and if I decide to do interviews at some point, I don't know, people have asked me about that, then the one question I'm going to make sure I ask continuously is, what introduced you to the magic of cinema? Because I feel like we all have that experience where it's like, whoa, this isn't just like, oh, I'm watching a movie and this is a fun. I mean, you can have fun and you can enjoy it, but there's something about certain films that just hits you somewhere else. And for me, at I'm guessing 3 or 4 years old, possibly, watching Jurassic Park was kind of not to oversell it, but it was kind of a transcendent experience because I had never seen someone take a concept like this. I didn't even think it was possible to create something like this, where you have dinosaurs. And even my mom has talked about how when she heard about it, like, oh, a movie about dinosaurs, like in the real world. She's like, oh, that's dumb. I would have watched, like, no. And she says she went to watch it and she was kind of blown away. And it's not just part of it, of course, are the practical effects, which still, in my opinion, hold up today. I think in a world full of CGI and all the things we see, even though there's like a little moment here or that of early CGI, but so much of this is so practical, and so much of this is like built and crafted and created. I love how it takes such a simple concept, like, hey, we're building a theme park, we're going to have dinosaurs. And part of the excitement, of course, is how that goes horribly awry. But then the deeper aspects of playing God and trying to mess with nature and mess with things that don't need to be tampered with, and how that has devastating consequences. I just think that Jurassic Park is just such a experience. There are some films that are just experiences. And what also helped was riding Jurassic Park at Universal Studios. That definitely added to my appreciation as well. And I would say that was probably my earliest experience with a film score and really feeling the impact of music, because John Williams, and it's just every time you hear him, like, it's just, I literally just felt something inside myself when the music would hit. And it's just a very impactful film. It's a more obvious film and a more obvious example of that, but I can't deny the impact that it had on me at such a young age.
Yeah. I love your commentary, Dee. I'm sorry, I just had to say that. I just love hearing you talk about film. You're so right, though. I was thinking about putting it on my list as well. Yeah, I don't know. That movie's just incredible. I love what you said about the magic of the movies, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But that is one of the movies that you think about, like, what can you do with movies, like transcend filmmaking, and Jurassic Park's one of them for sure. So my number 3 is a film called Mysterious Skin. Have you ever heard of it?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it stars Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Brady Corbett, and it is a film about these 2 young boys, and something horrible happened to them. This collective thing happened to them in their childhood, and it's about them when they are older, kind of grappling with this abuse that happened in their life in 2 very different ways. One of them thinks that he was abducted by aliens, and the other one becomes a teenage prostitute. So very dark film. But this movie, I hated the first time I saw it because I had a panic attack while I watched it. And because it's so just like gritty and raw, and there's parts of it that feel very grimy and like cinema verite almost in some points, where it just feels like you're there and you don't want to be there. But this was also a time in my life when I was kind of deciding, when I was going to come out of the closet and being comfortable in my own skin. And this film kind of represented to me that, everyone has these past traumas in their life, and everyone is trying to feel comfortable in their own skin. So it kind of just, it meant a lot to me for a lot of different reasons. And to also just see, like, there can be abuse towards men as well as women, and all of these different things that I hadn't really seen portrayed on film before. And even though it was an extremely hard watch, like I said, panic attack first time I watched it, the second time I was able to be like, prepare myself for what I was watching. And then I kind of opened myself up to it. And it just was kind of like a profound experience for me. And anytime, as a side note, anytime you put a Sigur Rós song in a movie, to me at least, like, it just, like, there's something about their music. It just, like, so impactful. So yes, Mysterious Skin is my number 3.
I definitely can appreciate a gritty story, and just how they speak to the realities of life. I know we've touched on some of that here, but yeah, definitely one I have to check out.
Yeah, just Be prepared. No one prepared me when I first watched it, so I was going in blind, and I don't recommend that to anybody.
So my next film, my number 2, is Beauty and the Beast, directed by Gary Trousdale and Kirk Wise in 1991. For me, Beauty and the Beast was at the very, very, very beginning. If Addams Family wasn't first, then Beauty and the Beast, it's probably between those two. Like one of the first, like one of the earliest films I ever watched. I think that although people have their issues with Disney, I think no one can deny their impact, and I think everyone has a certain film that they attach themselves to, or they appreciate, or whatever it might be. And for me, Beauty and the Beast was a film that, of course, is beautifully animated. It has beautiful songs. There is a lot aesthetically and visually that is so spectacular and visually appealing and all of that. And it's a beautiful film, period. But for me, what was so interesting is that I watched Beauty and the Beast at a very, very, very young age, before I even really knew much about the world and understanding life. And what I realized is that, Beauty and the Beast was the beginning of my development of imagination and really appreciating the exuberance of childhood and having this sense of joy and excitement, and having my imagination stirred and suddenly seeing all the possibilities in life. And what was so beautiful about Beauty and the Beast is that although it's a castle and a beast and enchanted objects and all this magical all this magic going on throughout the story, at some point I remember one of the earliest times I remember watching that film anywhere else besides my home was when I was around. One of the earliest memories I remember being around my family and kind of having the awareness that this was my family, and being kind of awkward and kind of not knowing what to do. And so sitting in the middle of the floor, my grandmother asking me if I wanted to watch something, I said Beauty and the Beast, because that's my go-to. And it's hard to say because it's not like I knew it then, but Beauty and the Beast was really my understanding of how film could parallel my own life. Because Beauty and the Beast was a totally different story from mine. Of course, it didn't look anything like my life. But with my family, with my experiences, being a child, this was back in Indiana and Chicago, life was magical. Like life was, there was a sense of magic in my experience with my family. No matter if I was in the car or at someone's house, whether it was my dad or my grandmother or my mom, no matter who it was, every day held possibility. Every day held a sense of joy and hope and promise. It's a little bittersweet because you get older and you lose some of that. So it can be difficult for me to watch a lot of animated films because I think about how much of that shaped me and how some of that has been disrupted along the way. But Beauty and the Beast goes beyond just animation and just what people might perceive as just a children's film. And also for someone who loves books and kind of taught myself how to read off of the kind of picking up with my parents and my grandmother, having a heroine who loves books and sings about books, and having a scene where the Beast gives Belle this massive library, like it was like next level for me to see. So sorry, that was a lot. But with Beauty and the Beast, it definitely was the beginning of so many things, especially as a child, understanding the world, understanding life, and appreciating film for the way that it paralleled my own life.
I mean, I love that movie. I think everyone loves that movie. But I love what you kind of said about kind of, the magic. Everything seemed so magical, and just everything was an adventure when you're younger. And that word disrupt, that, how the life has disrupted kind of some of that magic. The fact that Beauty and the Beast, I think still to this day, can bring that magic back is really important. My number 2 is a film that you haven't seen, or I don't think yet. My number two is Donnie Darko.
Oh yes.
Donnie Darko. What I have so much to say about this movie. Donnie Darko, I was kind of like your experience with Mulholland Drive, and the first time I watched it, I was like, "What are people talking about? This movie is garbage." Like I hated it. I think on my Rotten Tomatoes review, I think I gave it like a D minus, something terrible. And then a couple of years later, I had a group of friends, and they're like, "Let's watch Donnie Darko," and I was like, "No," but they decided to not listen to me, and I'm so happy that they did not listen to me because I saw something there that I didn't see before. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to revisit this again. And slowly by surely, I kept watching it over and over again. And kind of like your experience with Cloud Atlas and talking with friends, I'll never forget. I sat down with a group of people. Most of them hadn't seen the film before. And most of them weren't super big on movies. But for hours and hours and hours, we sat there and just dissected every little piece of that movie. And it was just such an incredible experience. And I think that was the first time I just was able to sit down with people and do something like kind of like what we're doing now, you know? And it just, that movie's changed me. I think it personally, it ages like a fine wine almost. Like every time I watch it, I get something new out of it. And I love movies that do that, you know, like you can watch it one time and you're like, you get one thing, and then the next time it's like a different experience every time. So just, I think Donnie Darko is an absolute masterpiece, and I really hope you watch it.
Yes, yes. No, you put me on notice, so I have to watch it now.
Yeah.
All right. And so my number one, it kind of goes hand in hand with the last film I mentioned. And that film is Titanic, directed by James Cameron in 1997. So there's a whole lot with Titanic, and make sure I gotta kind of, keep it, condense it a little bit. But I would say on the like, when I think about myself as someone who appreciates film, I had never seen a film pour so much detail and so much technique and so much everything into telling a story the way this film did. I'll never forget even the types of things I was used to seeing in film. The scene, like the moment where Rose is talking about how Titanic was a ship of dreams, and it was, and then we see the screen, and it fades into the present day. And you see this massive crowd of people, and like that in itself was something I had never seen before. But just recreating that ship and having these models and having these sets, and part of why this film was so impactful was because I bought the book. Like there was a book that detailed the entire production experience and all the costumes and everything. And I think that is probably what literally opened the door for what film was, beyond just the experience, understanding like there's a lot of work that goes into this. Like like the concept art and looking at everything, and I was engrossed thoroughly. And I understand it probably gets backlash or people are annoyed by it because, Jack and Rose and all of these, pieces that seem corny and silly, which I understand. But for me, it goes beyond just the story. It's about just my understanding of cinema and film and what can come out of it when you invest so much time and you invest so much effort, and understanding that and appreciating that. And then on the more emotional side of things, I think this film signaled a shift in me as far as it being the year that I kind of moved out of childhood unexpectedly. There was something very unfortunate about having a film that is about these people journeying to a new life and having this expectation of life and, of hope and in the future and all of that, and having this really unexpected tragedy happen in the midst of that. And that could completely kind of destroy everything. And unfortunately, it literally paralleled that experience of my own life. And it was the first time I have ever had an extreme emotional experience where it was like this outpouring in it. And yes, the film is sad in itself, but there was also this sense of loss and disorientation in these moments in the film. Even when I think about the moment after the ship has sunk and Rose is out there on the door, and all the screams have faded away, and she can see the Titanic in the clouds. Like this sense of still being in this place of confusion and darkness, and now, like, what's the next step here? Like, how do we move forward? And my own journey in life kind of paralleled that, and having to go through a lot of upheaval and a lot of turmoil and grief and sadness in the midst of that. And ironically enough, a funeral that took place happened to coincide with one of my relatives having the film, and the film was playing before we were going to go to the church to, say our farewell. And so it's interesting just to look at that film and to see how much it did to propel me forward in my appreciation of film. But it also was a representation of extreme emotions and extreme grief and loss. And that was new for me. And I'll always appreciate how that film, in a way, it sounds silly, but it was kind of like therapy. It was kind of like a conduit for me to outpour those emotions, and then, just, go forward in life. That's really all you can do.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I love that movie. I think it's really interesting. Both of our number ones are number ones for a lot of the same reasons, not just because of like the magic of cinema or the grand scale of these films, but also, that we connect these films to some sort of tragedy. And it's interesting that, that connection can be so impactful. But great choice, T. My number one is, and I'm kind of cheating here, I guess, but it's the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And I've talked about these movies a lot on my channel, but I will say just the reasons that you spoke about, the grand scale of Titanic and recreating this, and how much work goes into creating something like Titanic. The same can be said about the Lord of the Rings films, and how much love and blood and sweat and tears went into creating this, and you can see all of that up on the screen. The Lord of the Rings trilogy, to me, it showed me that anything and everything is possible in the film medium. Like, people looked at the Lord of the Rings books and said, these can never be made in the right way. And then Peter Jackson got banded together with, Weta and all of these people, and they created something, and they're like, here, we can actually do it. And they did it. So just the possibility of filmmaking is why I guess the Lord of the Rings trilogy is my number one. But also because the Lord of the Rings was my mom's favorite books. She knew how to write in Elvish. She was a big old Lord of the Rings nerd. And she would literally just like take me out of school. Like, today we're seeing Lord of the Rings for the sixth time in theaters, or the seventh time. And that wasn't just when the first one came out, but it's like, next year this is going to happen again, and then next year it's going to happen again. The whole idea of the event, movies being an event in the household too, that was what the Lord of the Rings brought to me as well. So obviously a ton of different reasons, but yeah, the Lord of the Rings just definitely changed my viewpoint of cinema forever.
Well, that officially wraps up our top 10 films that have changed us. How are you feeling, Shawn? How was that?
I'm feeling good. I feel like this was very therapeutic. It was like a therapy session.
Yes, definitely. All films in some way or another that have impacted us, that have shaped how we see film. And it was not easy because I realized there are a lot. So I'm sure it wasn't easy for you either.
Yeah, I kept thinking like, oh, I have my list down. Then I'm like, no, what about that one? So I just kept going back and forth. And I mean, we could probably do 4 more of these lists.
Right.
But it's amazing how much, like how film obviously has impacted our lives in such a very intense way.
Yeah, it really is. And you don't think about it because we watch films and we go through life and that's kind of it. But then, you know how hindsight is. And so now
Mhm.
looking back and it's like, wait, this is like we see all the how this has all kind of come together over time.
Absolutely.
So yeah, thank you so much for joining me,
Thank
Sean.
you.
Thank you for coming up with the concept and the idea. I assume, maybe I don't know. I'm assuming this won't be our last collaboration.
Oh, not even a little bit. There's a lot in the works, D.
That's awesome, definitely.
Well, Dee, this was amazing, but I would love for you to tell everybody out there how they can find you and what D Movie Man is all about.
Yes. Well, first and foremost, you can find me on YouTube at capital D period space Movieman Movie Man. You can also find me under that name at TikTok, on Instagram, and then on Twitter, I am Movie Man D. A lot of my channel is just simply expressing my appreciation for film and the occasional television show. So I do movie reviews, I do trailer reactions from time to time, hoping to do more rankings in the future. And currently working through a couple of TV recaps, currently going through the second season of Bridgerton, and just hoping, to grow and cover a lot more as I go forward. So.
Absolutely. I love your channel and I love your TV recaps. I cannot get enough of your commentary on Bridgerton. So everybody, please watch his Bridgerton recaps. They are amazing. I cannot wait to do another collaboration with you again sometime very, very soon. So thank you everybody so much for watching and we will see you soon. Bye guys.